Let's get it started. And this is the session number 1, Western Day 1, autonomous vehicles, transport infrastructures. We have 5 presentations. Let's just move on to the first presentation, which will be given by Dr. Yu, who is a postdoc researcher at the University of California, Irvine. And he is a professional, IT certified professional transport planner. And Dr. Yu also provides solutions as a senior engineer through income, and his research focuses on human AI teaming for resilient infrastructure and mobility systems. All right, Dr. Yu, now you may share your screen and make your presentation. Thank you. Stop sharing mine.
Thanks. Let me share my screen really quick. So what's my screen? Sorry.
That's good.
Awesome. Give me a sec. Hi, everyone. Good morning. If you're it's morning, and today I'd like to use this conference as a opportunity to propose using shared autonomous electric vehicles, or SAEVs, for improving infrastructure and community resilience. I'll first introduce the concept and then present a flexible modeling and evaluation framework demonstrated by 3 different case studies. So we are quite aware of the challenges of having more resilient infrastructure in response to natural hazards, such as hurricanes, blizzards, and earthquakes. Adding on top of it is the fact that resilient infrastructure is necessary but not sufficient for resilient communities. Parallel to this challenge is the recent development in the technologies that enable automated mobility, energy transition, and shared economy. So the broad question is whether we can take advantage of this trend to improve the infrastructure and community resilience. There are at least 2 categories of efforts for having a more resilient and adaptive infrastructure and community. One is focusing on the post-disaster emergency response, such as post-disaster response and its preparation, and the other is more preventative, such as better funding allocation and a technical improvement in material, structural, geotechnical, and hydraulic aspect of the critical infrastructure. And this presentation is about the former, which is about a post-disaster emergency response with the aid of shared autonomous electric vehicles, or SAEVs. So we propose in disruptive events, SAEVs can be temporarily recruited and deployed to evacuate and rescue at-risk populations, provide electric power, essential supplies and services to vulnerable households and businesses, and transport repair crews and equipment here. We call it this SAEV-R, or SAEV-R. There are several major properties or characteristics of SAEVs that make them an attractive option. SAEV fleets are usually owned by companies, public agencies, and the communities, so it's easier to negotiate and sign contracts about emergency recruitment in advance in large quantity or during disasters to recruit, compared to the private vehicles. And because they are automated, we don't need to risk human drivers to do dangerous tasks, and we don't need to schedule for their breaks. Because they are electric, they can naturally serve as power banks to transfer and provide electric energies. And as SAEVs can be aerial or service or both, so they can be adaptive to a wide range of scenarios. So it seems SAEV-R is a promising instrument. The next task should be the feasibility and benefit cost analysis. Considering the wide range of possible SAEV tasks and disaster scenarios, it is important to have a flexible and consistent modeling and evaluation framework. And because of the time-sensitive nature of the disaster response, the models also need to be dynamic instead of only capturing the equilibrium conditions. Additionally, such dynamic models should ideally satisfy the properties of Markov decision process or state space representation, so that we can apply various optimization algorithms such as dynamic programming, reinforcement learning, and control methods. The general idea of the framework is to use 3 coordinated sets of state chains. The first set of the chains captures the state transition of SAEVs in states such as idling, in-service, and charging. The second set captures the connected state of the disaster response resources, such as the repair crews, tools and equipment, and the essential supplies such as water, food, and medicine. The third set of chains captures connected states or coordination of the damaged infrastructure, conditions of the damaged infrastructure and the affected communities to be helped. So next, I will present 3 specific SAEV-R use cases guided by the proposed modeling framework. The first case study involves utilizing SAEVs to transfer energy from functioning power subgrid to the power grid subgrid that are experiencing power outage. The second case examines the use of SAEVs to provide essential supplies to communities affected by the pandemic. Lastly, we examine the use of SAEVs to accelerate infrastructure recovery, where the vehicles are utilized to transport both repair personnel and repair equipment to the damaged infrastructure sites to speed up the recovery. Hurricane Sandy was a powerful Category 3 Atlantic hurricane that caused significant damage and loss of life in October 2012. The storm induced widespread power outage and the community's disruption, and some areas were without power or clean water for several weeks. This lower side photo shows that due to the hurricane, a portion of the lower Manhattan experienced a blackout for around 4 days. During that time, many buildings were left without power, which caused significant disruptions to businesses and residents, with many people forced to evacuate their homes and relocate to temporary shelters. We propose employ the charging and discharging functions of SAEVs to transfer energy from functioning power subgrid to dysfunctional power subgrid. So based on the proposed modeling framework, we developed a strategic level planning tool to study the general relationships between the SAEV fleet size and the amount of unmet energy demand that can be served by SAEVs. The objective is to minimize SAEV recruitment and maximize unmet energy demand. So, to simplify the analysis, we ignore the possibility that SAEVs may also simultaneously deliver water, food, medicine, and other essential resources to the communities. We modeled 4 major states of SAEVs: en route to charge, being charged, en route to discharge, and serving communities that are experiencing power outage. The unserved demand is measured in kilowatt hours. We assume vehicle battery is 50 kilowatt hours with about 0.36 kilowatt hours per mile. The distance from the charging location to the discharging locations is assumed to follow an activity exponential distribution with a mean of 15 miles, and the average speed is assumed 25 miles per hour. We assume that the average charging and discharging times are 5 and 6 hours respectively, and we use the household level hour-by-hour energy usage profile of the 2022 November from the U.S. Energy Information Administration to approximate the unmet demand pattern. We tested the impact of different fleet size on the cumulative unmet energy demand. As shown in the upper right figure, we can see that about 2,500 SAEVs achieve a reasonable trade-off between minimizing the number of SAEVs to recruit and minimizing unmet energy demand. The minor and quite irregular fluctuations are caused by the fluctuation of the newly unmet demand. The lower right figure shows the stack chart of SAEVs in different states, for different states, with the fleet size is set as 2,500. As the SAEVs states gradually reach an equilibrium state after about 10 hours, we only show the time profile of the first 15 hours. As expected, is in the initial hours, a large portion of the SAEVs go to the charge in the area with functioning grids, subgrids, and then later more and more SAEVs start actually discharging the area that are experiencing power outage. During the COVID-19 pandemic, vulnerable populations in the county of Denver, Colorado, included individuals who are older than 65 and have underlying health conditions and have low income and lack access to healthcare and transit. These populations may be at higher risk of severe illness or death if they contract COVID-19. It is important for public health officials and community organizations to provide targeted support and resources to those groups to help protect their health during the pandemic. So we propose to use SAEVs to fulfill the needs of delivering essentials resources with minimum human contact. So we instantiated the proposed modeling framework into a concrete model to form a preliminary understanding about the SAEV fleet size required to effectively serve the vulnerable households. The objective is to minimize SAEV recruitment and maximize the portion of households that have essential supplies during a service period. In this example, we dispatch SAEVs to deliver food, medicine as essential services to communities with low mobility, immunity, and accessibility during the pandemic. The state transition diagram for vulnerable households is illustrated on the upper left figure. We assume each SAEVs can carry supplies for around 5 households, as the most severe period of the pandemic lasts several months or for multiple periods, or multiple times. And we focused on the steady state condition. We also assumed the sufficient supply of SAEVs, so we ignored SAEV charging needs to simplify the analysis. We conducted a sensitivity analysis with respect to the changes in the average time, 24, 48, and 96 hours for households to consume 1 bundle of essential supplies. We tested the SAEV's fleet size with 200, 500, 800, and 1100, and tested 5, 25, and 45 miles of average delivery distance. The right-hand figure displays the system performance when varying the percentage of vulnerable households from 2% to 8% of the about 314,000 households in the county. We see that when the consumption time is low, the fleet size and delivery distance have more influence on the percentage of the shared households than when the consumption time is high. But we can also see that the delivery distance has more impact on the percentage of the served households when the fleet size and the average consumption time are low, which has implications on the site selection of distribution centers relative to the location of the potential vulnerable populations. The results suggest the importance of having a good balance between depot and household warehouse locations, vehicle size, and the portion of supplies per each household delivery constrained by the vehicle capacity. And the San Diego region of California is located on the Pacific plate near the boundary with the North American plate, making it susceptible to earthquakes. Suppose San Diego County, California, experiencing a major seismic event that causes major infrastructure to fail. We propose to use SAEVs to transport repair crew from their homes and repair tools and spare parts from inventory and offices, routed by the latest information on the condition about the pavement and the takeoff and landing platforms. This way, most repair crews do not need to go back to the depots first or offices first. Instead, they can directly meet with the tool, quote unquote, meet with tools and spare parts directly at the damaged location. We established quantitative model using proposed framework to investigate the relationship between the number of SAEVs and the recovery process or progress at a strategic planning level. The objective is to minimize SAEV recruitment and maximize the recovery speed. SAEVs are deployed for 2 main purposes. They transport repair crews from homes directly to the location of the damaged infrastructure and equipment. When the repair crew members reach maximum working hours, the SAEVs transport them back home to rest. SAEVs also transport repair tools and spare parts from the depot or warehouses to the damaged locations. The lower left figure illustrates the state transition of the damaged infrastructure measured in terms of the remaining work or effort measured in person hours required to complete the repair. We conducted sensitivity analysis with respect to the changes in person hour needed, fleet size, and the total crew member. As expected, the repair speed depends mainly on whether it's the fleet or the repair crew to be the constraining variable. As earthquakes might also lead to damage of communication and transportation infrastructure, emergency response operators might need to additional SAEVs to potentially serve for purposes such as temporary communication towers. So in conclusion, we propose here the concept of SAEV-R or SAEV-R that leverages synergies of sharing economy, automated and connected vehicles technologies, and electrification technologies. Using concrete examples, we show the SAEVs could be a promising tool to help mitigate disaster impact on community and accelerate infrastructure recovery. We propose an intuitive and a standardized modeling framework to evaluate the various use cases of SAEV-R without without the significant computational burden of an agent-based approach. We consider the framework sufficiently general and flexible, as we demonstrate in 3 different case studies. We believe that this proposed framework will be a valuable tool for enabling organizations to make informed strategic level decisions about how to best utilize SAEVs to enhance their resilience of their communities and infrastructure in destructive events. So clearly, this is just a start, and the devil is always in the details when we consider the actual implementation. So we encourage more researchers and practitioners to join us and invest this topic together. And here's my contacts and my co-authors' contacts, and please reach out to us if you are interested in this topic. And thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you, Dr. Yu, and we are going to hold all the questions to the end of the session if you have time. And let's move on to our next presenter, Yujie Li, who is a PhD student at Purdue University, and she had a bachelor's degree from Southeastern University, and also her research focuses on the control for connected automated vehicles and also human factor related research. All right, Yujie, are you here? I didn't see you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, good.
Okay.
Please share screen.
Yes, sure. Okay. Okay, sorry, I should start from the first one. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and my name is Yujie Li. Today, I'm going to present one of our recent studies, which is about establishing connected and autonomous vehicles and vulnerable road user interactions in the transportation ecosystem. So here's the outline for today's presentation. First, we will take a quick look at the background for the research. I will introduce the benefits of using vehicle connection and automation. Then I will introduce a key concept for this research, which is transportation ecosystem. Then we will take a look at the problem settings for the study. After that, we will move on to the detailed technical methods and the results for the study. And the last part is for introducing the ongoing work for this research. Okay, now first, the background. As we all know, our cities have undergone various changes, and transportation systems and technologies are playing crucial roles in these transformations. Recent decades have seen significant progress in incorporating vehicle automation and vehicle connection. There are tons of studies focusing on investigating the anticipated benefits for vehicle automation and connection. For instance, we know that the vehicle automation can help with improve mobility and enhance efficiency, safety, sustainability. And besides all these benefits, more importantly, since drivers are released from driving tasks, we have more free time during commuting. It sounds very fascinating and promising, right? While there are still a lot of challenges if we want to implement connected and autonomous vehicles in the traffic systems. And here is one of the challenges we are faced now. So I would like to first introduce a concept which is called transportation ecosystem. The reason I mention it here is because, as we all know, the transportation system, first, it's a system. It means there are a lot of elements in the system which will interact with each other. And if we want to adopt autonomous cars in the real world, we do need to consider the interactions between the autonomous cars and other road users. So that's why I have to mention the ecosystem here. So by definition, the transportation ecosystem is a system which views the entire travel environment on street and roads as entity, and different types of vehicles and road users will use the environment and infrastructure to move from one point to another. And as these slides show, there are several important elements of the transportation ecosystem. For instance, we have traditional vehicles, and we also have some infrastructure such as traffic signals, roads. And besides that, we also have communication infrastructure such as roadside units and different types of sensors. Besides all these elements, there is another very important but very special type of road users, which is called vulnerable road users. And so vulnerable road users, or in short, VRUs, are a special section of road users such as pedestrians, cyclists, elderly, and disabled persons. These type of road users are at most risk among all the traffic users. There are statistics showing that the recent increase in pedestrian deaths is even more alarming when looking back to 2019. We see that pedestrian deaths have surged 18% comparing the first half of 2019 and 2022. So we do need to take actions to improve the safety for vulnerable road users. And in 2017, pedestrian fatalities in Colorado reached an all-time high. That's why Colorado DOT launched a pedestrian safety campaign in 2018 to shed light on the importance of pedestrian safety. And on the top left corner is a poster which they designed to emphasize the importance of eye contact. And they have a slogan as "Make eye contact before takeoff." So, which is quite reasonable in our daily life, right? So if you are a pedestrian and you want to cross a street, so a common way we would do is we will try to make eye contact with the driver in the car, in the approaching car. And if they show some intentions to yield, like, or use their gestures, then we can confidently cross the street. Well, can you imagine the following scenario? So one day you are still a pedestrian and you want to cross the street, but surprisingly you found that the approaching vehicle is a fully autonomous car. Then how can you make eye contact with nobody? So that can be very challenging, right? So this is why we want to conduct this study, and this is one of the most important motivations for this research. So in this research, we try to investigate innovative ways which can re-establish the interaction between the autonomous cars and the pedestrians. And this slide shows some traditional ways we may use for VRUs and vehicles interactions. For instance, we may use some active signals like gestures, eye contact, or even shout. While these methods may not be so effective when you want to interact with CAVs. So here we summarize our study objectives as follows. In this research, we would like to investigate the interaction between fully autonomous cars and the vulnerable road users in a virtual environment. And in that simulated environment, we want to design new communication methods for CAV and vulnerable road user interactions. Okay, and now let's take a look at the methodology part. So before we start the experiment design, we try to step on the surround. We try to conduct a comprehensive literature review. So the way we do it is first we identify relevant studies by first we identifying 4 main research databases. Then we search the platforms using keywords including connected and autonomous vehicles, vulnerable road users, interaction, and virtual reality. We successfully identified 31 studies. And among all those studies, we try to answer the following research questions. First, what are the main use cases being investigated in those studies? And second, how are the scenarios configured? And third, what type of measures are used in those studies? And these tables summarize different factors influencing vulnerable road user experience and behavior. So we summarize all the 31 studies and try to identify the potential influencing factors. And all the factors can be generally categorized as 5+, including vehicle, traffic, environment, social, and sound. So I may not have enough time to go over all the factors one by one, but here I do want to mention some very interesting factors. For instance, there are some studies try to investigate the automation levels. So in those studies, they try to comparing pedestrians' behavior when they are interact with different types of vehicles. For instance, either the approaching vehicle is driven by human or whether they are fully autonomous. There are studies showing that the pedestrians tend to make crossing decisions based on their legacy strategy of gap acceptance, no matter whether the approaching car is human-driven vehicles or fully autonomous. And there are also some studies showing that participants who can recognize autonomous car showed a higher level of trust in automation. Another interesting factor is driving behavior of those autonomous cars. So typically, autonomous cars were designed to maintain a constant speed or yield to pedestrian following a predetermined acceleration curve. However, in several studies, researchers try to introduce different driving behaviors of the autonomous cars. And they want to check how pedestrians inferred intentions from those vehicles' kinematics and what's pedestrians' expectations of AVs during AV driving behavior. And the results show that if the autonomous car adopted an early deceleration and those driving behavior was able to communicate an AV's intention of giving way. And it can also provide high levels of comfort to the participants. In contrast, late and abrupt braking was perceived as aggressive driving, and it will decrease trust in AV technology. And I also found there's very interesting factor, which is called social factors. So social factors describes pedestrians' behavior may be affected because of like surrounding pedestrians. And there is only one study which they try to investigate the potential group behavior. The way they do it is they included AI-based virtual pedestrians of varying demographics. And there are 2 types of crossing behaviors of those virtual pedestrians. One is called early crossers. Specifically, those virtual pedestrians will cross when the vehicles just start to slow down. And the second type is called timely crossers. So for these type of virtual pedestrians, they will cross when the vehicles are almost at a complete stop. And in this study, the researchers found that there is no statistical significant impact of group influence, but it's only one study. So I still think it's very interesting. So, and we may try to incorporate these factors in our experiment. And also for all those studies, we summarized the experimental tasks for the pedestrians. Most of the studies will ask the participant to implement neutralistic working, while some studies will just ask pedestrians to indicate their intentions. And besides the experimental tasks, here summarize the different types of metrics which were used in those studies. Some studies will use either video recordings or observations to get behavioral data of their participants. There are also some ways to get more objective metrics, such as how much time the participant would hesitate before they cross the street, or how much they will wait before they take any actions. And now let's take a look at the ongoing work. So based on our comprehensive literature review, we are able to configure our own experiment. And now we are still recruiting the participants and collecting more data. So our settings for the experiment is as follows. We will ask the participants to be equipped with VR headset, and they will be exposed into the simulated environment. We use web camera, eye tracker, and joystick to get their response for the different scenarios. And also we designed several surveys to get their subjective response for the experiment. And hopefully we can share more details after we finish this experiment. So here summarize this presentation. So in this study, we conducted comprehensive literature review for VR-based pedestrian experiments. Especially, we identified main use cases investigated in those previous studies. We compared scenarios. Configured with respect to factors that influence vulnerable road users' behavior. We designed VR-based experiment to enhance safety for vulnerable road users. And the ultimate goal for the experiment is to design new communication methods for autonomous vehicles and vulnerable road users. And thank you all for your time, and I'm open to questions.
All right, thank you, Yujie, and this is great. Okay, let's move on to our next presentation, and the next speaker, Chen from the Penn State University, and who is unable to join us actually today, and so we'll just play his recording. And now let's Kintaro, can you please just play the recording?
Yes.
It's not
Yeah, I need to
Right.
share the audio as well.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Chenxi Chen from the Pennsylvania State University. My presentation will be a machine learning based approach to assess impacts of autonomous vehicle on pavement performance. The SAEV's unique driving pattern potentially impacts a wide range of physical infrastructure from geometrical design to pavement performance. Some research has investigated the impact of SAEV's driving pattern on pavement performance. For example, due to the latest vehicular technologies, such as lane keeping and lane centering. Research suggests that the vehicle is usually placed at the center of a line, and such centralized Y-wander distribution will lead to an acceleration of pavement deterioration. Aside from lateral wandering, vehicle speed and car following spacing will also impact the pavement performance. However, lateral vehicle wandering is the only one that has been widely researched. Few studies have taken vehicle speed and car following spacing into consideration. Moreover, to understand how SAEV may impact pavement deterioration differently, we need the dataset of SAEV and HDV driving behavior pattern to make the apple-to-apple comparison. Nevertheless, systematical investigation on SAEV and HDV driving pattern and quantitative comparison has not been available. To bridge these research gaps, we first quantitatively investigated the driving pattern of SAEV and HDV and compared the difference, and then systematically assessed the actual impacts of SAEV driving features on pavement deterioration. In this study, we discussed the three driving patterns. IRI is utilized to evaluate pavement performance. IRI, or International Roughness Index, is a measurement index that quantifies the roughness or unevenness of a pavement surface. Then I will briefly introduce the framework of the research. There are three steps in this research. The first step is a driving pattern comparison. It quantitatively compared the lateral wandering, longitudinal car following distance, and speed of SAEV and HDV based on simulation and an open source dataset. The second step is pavement performance prediction model training. The input features contain two categories: contextual features like pavement structure, material, and climate. The driving pattern features include lateral wandering, longitudinal spacing, and speed. The output is IRI. All inputs and outputs of the prediction model are from an open source dataset. The third step is to evaluate the pavement IRI with the trained model in step 2. The contextual features are the same as used in model training data. The driving pattern features data is from the driving pattern comparison model. Finally, the pavement IRI on both SAEV and HDV scenario will be predicted and compared. The first step is the SAEV and HDV patterns comparison. The HDV patterns were investigated based on the NGSIM dataset at first. The next generation simulation program was released by Federal Highway Administration to collect detailed high-quality traffic datasets. The dataset used in this study was collected on eastbound I-80 in the San Francisco Bay Area in 2005. A total of 300,000 trajectory points from 778 vehicles are recorded. The left picture illustrates the scenario setup. The studied freeway segment has 6 lines and 2 ramps. Because the driving pattern may be different while vehicle merging or line changing, the vehicles that are from the on-ramp or driving towards the off-ramp, as well as the vehicles that have changed lines, are removed. After data cleaning, 600 vehicles trajectory remained and were utilized for driving pattern analysis. Samples of the vehicle trajectories are shown in the red figure. The blue dashed lines divided the figure into 6 lines, and each curve represents a vehicle trajectory. The SAEV traffic pattern is simulated by Kala and Sumo, two open-source simulation software widely used in autonomous driving simulation and traffic simulation. Specifically, Kala simulated the physical environment of I-80 as well as the vehicle dynamics and kinematics model in SAEV mode. Meanwhile, Sumo simulated the traffic flow with demand of NGSIM dataset. The vehicle trajectories will be recorded by color, and then the driving patterns can be analyzed. The table and figures shows the comparison results of the three driving patterns. First is the lateral wandering, as shown in the first figure. The x-axis represents the lateral position to the left edge of each lane in feet. 0 means the most left side, and 12 means the right side of the lane. The y-axis represents the percentage of vehicles with different lateral positions. It can be observed that the lateral wandering distribution of CAV is much more concentrated, with 0.46 feet of standard deviation, compared with HDV, which has 1.21 standard deviation. The second figure illustrates the longitudinal spacing comparison. The x-axis represents the spacing in feet. It can be found that the CAVs have smaller longitudinal spacing, with 31.5 feet in average, compared with HDV with 66.4 feet in average. The third figure shows the vehicle speed comparison. The x-axis represents the speed in miles per hour. It can be found that CAVs are in general driving slower than HDVs. The average speed of CAVs and HDVs is equal to 14.4 miles per hour and 80.4 miles per hour respectively. The pavement deterioration prediction model will be introduced next. The long-term pavement performance dataset (LTPP) dataset is utilized to train the prediction model. The 23 input features contain 3 driving pattern-related features: wandering, spacing, and speed, and 20 contextual features regarding climate, pavement material, pavement structure, and pavement initial performance. The output features is IRI International Roughness Index, a measure to evaluate the roughness or unevenness of pavement surface. As the IRI decreases, the pavement surface becomes smoother, which is better. The adapted model utilizes a boosting-based learning algorithm that reduces bias by training new weak learners based on the outputs of previous learners. The target is to minimize objective function L theta, which is a summation of loss function L and a regularization term. L is the loss function, which is calculated by the squared difference between real IRI and estimated IRI, which is IRI hat. IRI hat equals to the combination of a total number of k-base regression trees. As discussed before, LTPP dataset is utilized to train the prediction model, specifically 246 road sections with 1,707 observations that are released in July 2021 are used. To train the learning model, the dataset is randomly split into 2 parts, 80% for training and 20% for testing. The residual plot, the distribution of the model on training and testing data are presented in the figure. The x-axis stands for the predicted IRI, and the y-axis is the residuals. The blue dots represent the training sample, and the green dots represent the testing dataset. R square of the tested dataset equals to 0.887, which is satisfied to predict pavement IRI. Then, the training model is applied to understand the different impacts of CAV and HDV traffic patterns on pavement deterioration. The input dataset includes 2 parts. The contextual features are from LTPP and are the same on the HDV and CAV scenarios. 3 driving pattern-related features are from the NGSIM dataset for HDV scenario, and they are collected from simulation for CAV scenario as discussed in the driving pattern comparison chapter. This table represents the comparison results of pavement IRI. With the same initial IRI, we can observe that the final IRI of CAV scenario is higher. The increased IRI is defined by the final IRI minus initial IRI, and the result shows that CAV driving patterns lead to an acceleration of pavement performance by an average of 8.1%. This slide illustrates the sensitivity analysis result with different age, peak hour track volume, and CAV penetration rate. The first figure illustrates the impact of different ages on IRI on the CAV and HDV traffic patterns, with X-axis representing ages from 0 to 20 years, Y-axis representing the increased IRI. It can be found that in general, the IRI under the CAV scenario increases more than under the HDV scenario. The CAV impact, defined as the IRI increase for CAV minus the IRI increase for HDV, is also shown in the right. The blue curve shows that the CAV impact is more significant on new pavements, that is less than 4 years, than aging pavements. The second figure represents the impact of traffic volumes on pavement performance under the CAV scenario. The X-axis represents the peak hour track volume in 5 groups from 0 to 115 vehicles per hour, and the Y-axis shows the increased IRI. It can be observed that the pavement deterioration speeds up once the track volume is greater than 90 vehicles per hour. The impact of different CAV market penetration rates on pavement performance is also analyzed in the third figure, with the X-axis representing the CAV penetration rate increasing from 20% to 100%, and the Y-axis representing the increased mean IRI. It can be observed that the pavement performance will be affected most significantly at the beginning stage of CAV deployment. Finally, we can get the conclusions. First, the spatial CAV traffic pattern will deteriorate pavement faster than HDV by an average of 8.1%. Second, CAV deployment will create a greater impact on the younger pavements than on the aging pavements. Then, the pavement deterioration speed is found to be stable on the light traffic, while it will increase on the congested traffic. Moreover, the pavement performance will be affected most significantly at the beginning stage of CAV deployment with a lower penetration rate. That's all of my presentation. Thank you.
All right. Okay, let's just move on to our next speaker, who is Ruixuan Zhang from New York University, and he is affiliated with the SAEV-R Center, and his research interests are centered around application machine learning transportation with a focus on cyber physical transportation systems. All right, Ruixuan, are you ready?
Thank you. But can you let me share my screen? Okay, cool. Give me 1 sec. All right. Thank you, Professor Liu, for the introduction, and good morning, afternoon, evening to the online audience. My name is Ruixuan Zhang, and it is my great honor to be on behalf of the rest co-authors and present this work. It was completed when I was a master's student at the University of Michigan, and I would like to thank Dr. Ian Wang, Professor Nanda Masood, and Professor He Liu for their support and guidance. So the agenda for my presentation is as follows. I will start with some background, and then I will detail the proposed methodology. And following that, I will show the experiment's results, and finally conclude with some comments. So these years have witnessed tremendous advancement in transportation systems with connected automated vehicles, known as SAEV, and they're believed to bring many benefits from the perspectives of safety, economy, and mobility. However, opportunities always come along with challenges. By involving more connectivity and automation, SAEVs are exposed to many emerging risks. Based on taxonomy, the risks can either come from inside or outside. And furthermore, SAEVs require high fidelity data for decision making, but there always exist uncertainties in the measurements. All of the above mentioned concerns will ultimately contribute to failures caused by either unreliable state estimation or delayed communication due to the jamming attacks or a limited bandwidth. So to address these challenges and enable SAEVs to enjoy connectivity while keeping safe from attacks, our objective is threefold: secure SAEV sensor state estimation, detect anomalies, and analyze the Platoon stability under cybersecurity uncertainties. The first to ensure the functionality of a single vehicle, and the last thrust investigates the performance under the Platoon setting. So before diving into symbols and equations, I would like to start with a high-level illustration of how we approach this problem. So at the bottom lies the actual state of the SAEV, and on top of that are the onboard sensor and the controller. The controller takes in the information from onboard sensor readings and other SAEVs through the receiving hardware. So imagine that we insert a magic box that oversees all the information before the controller can use them. So what is magic box doing? Well, it basically performs signal filtering and detection. The way we realize it is first to construct the state space model and estimate the noisy sensor measurement. The anomalies will be detected based on innovation/residual in the context of Kalman filter. We further used extended Kalman filter and one class per vector machine detector in this study, and I will detail them shortly. And we also need to state the assumptions this work relies on, namely only longitudinal behavior is considered and no lateral behavior. Two types of random time delays, and anomalies resources and bounded acceleration, both negative and positive. We actually extend the Platoon dynamics model from the literature by distinguishing the two types of time delay, namely tau1 and tau2. And the model has two input variables, the location and the velocity. Here, the adjacent variable W indicates the connectivity topology between any two vehicles, and the clearance gap is the bumper-to-bumper distance. Alpha and beta are weights to calculate the weighted sum of G bar and D bar. If we further consider that two time delays are a random variable as shown in equation 2, we can actually prove that the input vector U for vehicle N and time T with such stochastic time delays tau1 tilde and tau2 tilde can be represented as an input vector U of constant time delays plus another noise term. So having that proposition in mind, we construct the augmented state space model. We firstly define the augmented state vector S tilde and the input vector U. The delta T in S tilde is the augmented state, and it compensates the potential bias in the velocity caused by the time delay. For the state space model itself, both S tilde and U have randomness due to the random time delay. And notice here that all variables containing randomness are highlighted in red. So now, by applying the proposition 1 just mentioned, the model can be expressed in the bottom set of equations, where the randomness in tau1 tilde and tau2 tilde goes into the process noise theta and becomes the theta tilde. In this way, we can obtain a neat formulation, and it is compatible with the extended gamma filter. So a quick summary before moving to the string stability analysis. We designed an augmented state space model and choose the chi-squared detector as a baseline. We further propose a learning-based detection method called one-class support vector machine. And unlike the chi-squared detector, which uses a decision boundary predefined by a threshold parameter, the OCSVM learns decision boundary from only non-anomalous training data. And those can be collected easily without the need to enumerate all possible types of anomalies. It can also directly learn potential bias from the training data, and which is more robust. And lastly, unlike the chi-square detector, the OCSVM does not impose any distributional assumptions on the data. All right, we have introduced the anomaly detection component, and now let's move to the string stability analysis. A formal definition is that for any perturbation imposed on the leading vehicle, it is string stable if the perturbation can be attenuated at the tail vehicle. So similarly, we construct the state space model. So several notations here. We consume M predecessor following cooperative topology with homogeneous vehicles. The state vector of perturbations in this case is constructed based on the equilibrium point, denoted as X star and V star. The definition for relative velocity and clearance gap remain the same as previous in the anomaly detection part. So with the abuse of notation, we reuse the symbol S tilde for the perturbation state vector. And after the first order linearization, we can obtain the equation as 6. The state space model is shown in equation 7. The observation is actually the perturbation of the velocity tilde, which is the yn of t here. So with some tedious derivation, we can obtain the equation 8 after Laplace transformation, where this capital T n minus 3 is the transfer function between the vehicle n and the vehicle n minus 3. To analyze the string stability, we do need the head-to-tail transfer function G. However, it is very difficult to obtain here due to the one vehicle is interacting with multiple leading vehicles. So instead, we can derive the head-to-tail transfer function by iteration as shown in the last equation. So now recall that the n predecessor following setting, we proved that the string stability can be achieved when the first n eigenvalues of the transfer matrix P are all less than 1. And I will skip this derivation for the sake of time, but if you want to take more details, please welcome to refer to our full paper. So now let's think about how to connect the anomaly detection with string stability. So with a set of attack parameters, the attack can be successfully detected of the probability eta, and the model can be also get subtouch of probability of 1 minus eta. So the Platoon model is now stochastic rather than deterministic. The probability eta is determined by the detection sensitivity P. So formally, we propose a new type of string stability. We call the Platoon is pseudo-string stable if a transient perturbation at the leading vehicle can eventually vanish at the tail of a infinite vehicle string. So this is for the first time considering the Platoon model under several attack uncertainties. And naturally, we can have two transfer matrices with or without several attacks. The criteria also becomes that if the first n eigenvalues of the expected transfer matrix are all less than 1, it is pseudo-string stable. And in this way, the performance of anomaly detection will affect the Platon stability as well. And now I will show some experiment results. Here is the Platon dynamics model and the anomaly types. Each vehicle receives information from its immediate 3 leading vehicles, which means n equals to 3. So for a single vehicle attack, this table shows the performance on the 3 testing scenarios with different time delay settings. Mixed types of anomalies have been applied according to the previous work done by the first author. And this table indicates that the OCS-VM with extended comma filter provides a significant improvement regardless the value of time delay. And we find that using augmented state formulation can significantly improve the performance of chi-square detector under stochastic time delay. And unlike this chi-square detector, we observe a slight decrease of performance in OCS-VM when it is combined with the augmented state extended comma filter. So the reason is that the OCS-VM itself can already learn the potential background bias in state transition model, and therefore the marginal benefit of using this AS-EKF is not prominent compared with the case for the chi-square detector. So for multiple vehicle attacks, we also visualize the velocity and the spacing error. So in this figure, the first row indicates the velocity without anomaly detector, and the second row shows the results after we add an anomaly detector. And this figure shows the spacing error similarly with and without anomaly detector. And we also show the string stability in the time domain analysis, where the maximum spacing error with anomaly detector and without anomaly detector. So all of these 3 experiments demonstrate the Platoon can stabilize with the anomaly detection. And we are also interested in the minimum requirement for an anomaly detector to maintain the Platoon's pseudo-string stable. Here, the blue curve represents the largest magnitude of all eigenvalues of the expected transfer matrix under detection uncertainties, namely p tilde. So the red dashed line indicates the critical point p tilde equals to 0.86 when the largest magnitude becomes exactly 1. And that denotes a pseudo-string stable Plateau of a 10 vehicles in these experiments. And if we assume they're all homogeneous vehicles, it means for each vehicle, their onboard anomaly detector should at least have around 98.5% of successful rate. And we also conduct sensitivity analysis on text parameters, but I just put them in the appendix, and please feel free to check that afterwards. So now for some concluding remark, this work considers anomaly detection and Platoon string stability as a whole, where we propose the augmented states model to compensate for the bias due to the time delay, and we also propose a learning-based OCS-VM detector. We propose the pseudo-string stability for Platoon under several attacks, and the results show that the OCS-VM outperforms the chi-square detector, and we derive the closed form expression for the pseudo-string stability as a function of detection sensitivity. So with that, I will end this presentation and welcome any questions. If you're looking for more details, please scan this QR code to access the full paper. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Ruixuan. And now let's move on to our next presentation, which will be given by myself. So, all right, I should introduce myself first at the beginning of the session. And my name is Junu. I'm an assistant professor from University of Alabama, and I do research about planning and safety. And so that's a little bit about myself. All right, let me now start sharing my screen to the presentation. I'm going to give, where's my mouse? Can't see my mouse. Okay, all right. Okay, let me reshare my screen. Okay, so should be good, right? Okay, everyone, thank you for staying for the session. In this session, I'm going to give you a talk about simulating shared autonomous vehicles in small, middle-sized urban areas in this country. And well, shared autonomous vehicles, it's not a really new concept. It has been a while. I mean, I think Dr. Carl Kochman might be one of the very first authors who proposed this idea, allowing shared autonomous vehicles to be shared. And there are some issues and behind the shared autonomous vehicles or the vehicles that are not being shared. So, which I'm not going to talk about. As I said, shared autonomous vehicles is not a new topic. It has been there for a while. If you just do a very simple web science search, you can find thousands of papers. They have basically a title in their title: shared autonomous vehicles or shared robots, shared driverless vehicles or self-driving taxi, similar names. Well, different names, but the same thing. And there is even a paper that is trying to summarize all those shared autonomous vehicles research. From authors with different focuses. And all right, but if you really go into those papers, I'll say most of the papers, if you think about it, and a lot of papers, especially those early studies, they just conducted simulations within some hypothetical contexts. And also, a lot of papers, they mainly just focus on one city or one area, and most likely large cities. But for the small cities, they are really beautiful, but small, and they are not being paid much attention. And we are talking about transportation equity or equal opportunities for everyone. But in this case, they've been treated equally in terms of the mobility transformation. I'm not sure, but at least from the research aspect, we don't see many studies, research that has been talking about the shared autonomous vehicles being introduced or deployed, planned for those regions. So our research is trying to focus on those small regions, and then there are 300 and nearly 400 those regions in this country, and they have different geographic shapes and the network and land use patterns, and also travel demand patterns that are so different. So in this case, I mean, even though somehow we may be able to simulate one region very easily, but the results from that region cannot be easily transferred to another region. So we need to simulate all of them somehow. That's really a lot of work. So this is our conceptual framework, and we try to kind of simulate this type of system, shared mobility system in all those regions, and then trying to find the performances of those the shared autonomous vehicle fleets, and then try to explain, I mean, are those performances related to the local travel demand or network graph properties? So that's the conceptual framework. And as I already said, objective, we try to simulate the SAVs for all those regions. And our methodology, the first thing we need to do is to prepare the network data. That's easy, OpenStreetMap. And Professor Bowen from University of South California, he processed the network data and shared data, I mean, for the public use. So we just borrowed the data, downloaded the data from his place. And then the other side is the preparing the travel demand data. And it's quite challenging to prepare to get the travel demand patterns for all those regions from just one source. In our case, and where we could contact all those travel, MPOs for them, ask them to give us their travel demand models. Well, that's just too much work. So we just looked into the census data and tried to focus on the commuting trips. So this LEHD, longitudinal employment household dynamic orange destination employment statistic data, and that gives us the orange destinations of those where people live and where people work. And then they but we still need to know when they start leaving home for work. So we use the relational household travel survey data to get to know the trip departure distributions. And the census block shapefile provides us the location of those homes and work locations. So with that, there is a process of trip synthesis, trying to generate those trips, commuting trips for all people, who are employed in those regions. And putting all them together, the demand and the network, the supply and the demand, so we could simulate the operations of the shared autonomous vehicles in those regions. And because our study is trying to understand what's the relationship between the SAEV performances and the road networks. So we need to look at the characteristics of the road networks. And this is also the information provided by the Professor Boyne. So we didn't measure the networks. So we just, because he has already measured all those networks already. And then this is showing how we create the synthetic homework trips based on the census data, the relational household travel survey data, and the census block shapefile. And that's just it's just not easy, but quite easy actually after we finished it. So when we got those synthetic homework trips, and we can look at this trip pattern attributes. And now we know some regions that have really long trips, and some regions have, this is showing the density. Some regions have a higher density of commuting trips, and some regions have a lower density of commuting trips. And we have density for area, density for road miles. So that's basically in this case, you can tell that for different regions, the travel demand is so different. Given the different travel demand levels, and you can imagine different level of services or different designs of the shared autonomous vehicles may need to be provided. So this is our framework of simulating the shared autonomous vehicles. It's really simple, and we only have two scenarios, basically saying a person who is willing to wait how much time, the maximum amount of time they are willing to wait, 5 or 10 minutes. There are more we can simulate, actually, like the speed of the vehicles and also the capacity of the vehicles. That is not being considered in our case. This is like preliminary study. That because basically just simulating one region that takes like, well, in this case it's only 1 or 2 hours. That's quick. So we spent 2 weeks to finish all those simulations. And I can tell you, if we allow the dynamic ride sharing or charging, that takes even longer. Even like 1 day for one region, that is like 1 year for finishing all this 374 region simulations. We still need to work to improve our algorithms, of course. So in terms of the performances of the SAEV fleets, and we looked at a lot, but I today want to focus on 2: the average number of trips or services per vehicle. This can be considered as the efficiency of the fleet. How many trips can a vehicle serve in a day? And another one is percent of empty vehicle miles, because when vehicles go to pick up a person, this vehicle is empty. That is empty vehicle miles. This will somehow increase the congestion levels for some regions. So we want to minimize it, but in our case, we don't minimize it. We just basically present it, observe it. So this is slide showing well, why it's not playing, but I don't know. It's not playing anyway. I don't know. Anyway, this is basically showing how our simulation looks like. Probably I need to it's just flying like that. Those filled dots are the occupied vehicles, and the empty dots are the empty vehicles. They are basically waiting for the next passenger. And we are, as I said, we have this kind of thing for the whole for 374 regions. That's just a lot of work. This is basically it's cool to show, but it is not very informative. So this is a summary table summarizing all those performances, and just look at the 2 measures for the average trips per vehicles and also percent of empty VMT. And for the waiting time 5-minute scenario, and we looked at on average all those regions, a vehicle can serve 16 trips. And if you look at the min and max, that is, I mean, a big range. And for the percent of the MT-VMT, 10%, around 10% for the 5-minute scenario. And again, the min and max, that's a big range from 6% to 15%. And now you may wonder which region is 60% and which region would be the 50%. So for the waiting time, 10 minutes, of course, if they are allowed to wait more time, we need less vehicles. And so one vehicle can serve more, slightly more, 18 trips per vehicle. And for the, well, because they wait longer, so vehicles can travel longer to pick up them. So the MT-VMT would be would increase a little bit. And this slide shows the relationship between the average trips per vehicle versus the average trip duration. And for regions have a longer trips, and their fleet efficiency would be lower because I mean you can basically imagine that. And then for the MT-VMT is also the similar relationship. It's lectively correlated. The longer the trip duration is in a region, and the longer trip duration is, that means the lower percent of the vehicle VMT. And this slide shows the kind of which region has the best performance, which region has the worst performance in terms of the trips per SAVs. And it's just interesting to know that for this region, I mean, they have a relatively lower efficiency in terms of the trips per SAV vehicle. That region is Smoky Mountain areas, and actually the actual reason for the lower performance in this region is unknown at this point, but probably this region is just it's not, I mean, it's livable, it's a livable community, but it's mountainous. It's not like other areas. I mean, if it's mountainous, then there's not many people living there. If it's people living there, I mean, that's it's not mountainous. So probably that region just have very special travel demand patterns or land use road networks. And for the MT-VMT, we don't see a very clear geographic pattern, but just from the 5-minute to 10-minute scenario, we can see there's an increase in the percent of MT-VMT. And this is showing that if we increase the total number waiting time because we want to reduce the vehicle fleet size, and what would be the consequence? And basically we can tell even it's the same strategy to reduce the fleet size, the outcome are different across different regions. So this would provide some implications that in the future, I mean, somehow for some region, if we do something to improve the performance of region or reduce the cost of operation, but this strategy may not be good for other region. So we have to think about some kind of customized or localized strategies for improving fleet performance. All right. So let's move on. I mean, this is basically building simple models, trying to understand how the fleet performances are related to the network, related to the trip characteristics. And very quick, for the trip per vehicles, I mean, if you want to increase the fleet efficiency, this network would have to have the less dead ends, less three-way intersections. That means greater connectivity of the network, and also denser trips and more longer trips and longer tolerable waiting times. And this is if you want to reduce the MT-VMT, the larger network and denser network and more connected network and more longer trips or denser trips. And this is a performance change from 5 to 10 minute tolerable waiting time. And smaller networks, sparser networks, then will be more likely to receive better benefits. And very quickly, limitations. There are so many limitations. We use the network data from the Professor Broin, so there may be some inaccuracy in the network. And also the SAV fleet operation modeling, we use employ the very simple agent-based modeling framework, and there's no dynamic ride sharing, there is no empty vehicle relocation strategy, or there is no speed changes. So basically just following the link speed limits, the vehicles. And speaking the statistical modeling, and it's also very simple linear regression. So there are ways we can improve it. The takeaways, I mean, the variations of the fleet performances across those regions, and some regions have a higher, I mean, better performance. Some regions have a poor, worse performance. And we build models trying to explain why some regions have a, I mean, higher efficiency or lower VMT, and this basically provides implications that say we need to customize the regions, customize the strategies for introducing the SAEV services in those regions. And after that, the data and our research, our work, and we are kind of producing the data, the homework trip data. That is what we have now. And actually, my team has started generating the not just homework trips, all the trips for those regions. And we believe those trip data are really good information, good data for the researchers, planners, and NPO stakeholders. And if you are interested in doing some mobility research for those small, middle-sized urban areas, you may reach out to us, and we are able to share with you the data for 1 or 2 regions. And just we are just want to make the data open access to everyone who is interested in doing research. And the next is just quick introduction about my lab. We do research about planning and safety, ITS, and that's pretty much it. And we are simulating not the vehicles, also not vehicles on the ground, vehicles also on the shoulder, also vehicles in the air. But that is urban air mobility. And also for the safety, we do the road safety and the driver safety and also responder safety. All right. So that's all. If you have any questions now, I think we are able to open up the floor to everyone to ask questions. Okay, can everyone hear me? It's really quiet. I just stopped sharing. No questions? If no questions, I'll start asking questions for Jiangbo. Are you still here?
Here.
Okay, I have a question saying because I mean it was not very clear to me that you presented a case say EV to deliver power. There is power outage. What do the EVs do? I mean SAEVs do. What do they deliver?
Yeah, so one of the use cases is to use the shared autonomous electric vehicles to deliver or transfer energy from the power subgrid that are functioning to the power subgrid that are not functioning. So we can use the vehicle to grid technologies to transfer the energy. So that's the general idea.
Are you telling me that the EVs will go to discharge some power to the grid?
Yes, directly to the grid or to the households directly.
Okay, I don't get it. Is there technology like that?
Yes, there is a technology called V2G technology that can release the energy that is charged in the battery and then release it to somewhere else.
Oh,
it's called V2G technologies.
Okay, well, yeah, it's quite to. I think it's quite too new to me at least. It's like because electricity somehow, can be delivered through batteries. I know that, but I never know we can use transfer systems to deliver the electricity.
Yeah, it's right now it's a relatively new technology, but it's there. But of course, I kind of also want to mention the importance of implementation challenges, because that also means that we need the facilities and the equipment that it can in the households or in the power substations to allow such usage for SAEV. So it's not just purely this SAEV thing; it's also the corresponding infrastructure support.
Okay, all right. I remember you mentioned about the vehicle speed is fixed in your simulation, in your model.
Yes, so the model assumed that the fleet size variation of the SAEV fleet size doesn't influence the congestion too much. So that's we assume this is a relatively reasonable assumption considering the fleet size is usually just a few thousand or 10,000, which is quite small compared to the overall network size.
All right. So I think there's another assumption, right? I mean, the vehicle range would not be reached in a day, because you didn't mention about charging.
I mean, in the presentation, I mentioned about the charging facilities is around. I mean, in one of the case studies, the charging location is about 15 miles away. So that's take a little bit. It's not definitely less than a day to reach the charging station and then come back and to discharge or to deliver food or medicines and water.
Yeah, I mean, because when we talk about SAEVs, we would talk about the vehicle ranges and also the time for charging. And I mean, if they just I mean, provide so many services, too many miles, they have to go back to recharge.
Right. Yeah. So it really depends on the depot or the distribution center's location. So if it is less than the driving range, which is probably right now from 100 to 300 miles. Then if that's the case, then 50 miles driving delivery distance is sufficient. It's quite small compared to the battery capacity.
All right. Yeah, that's great. You talk about the Denver case. I just wonder, is that a real world case or real world data? Like you say, the power outage, is that a real world data or just assumed cases?
Oh, the Denver case is not about the energy transfer. It's about the essential supplies. Even though I agree those the energy, they can do the energy and the essential supply simultaneously. But during the pandemic, the power itself is not really a particular issue. So in that case studies, we use SAEVs to deliver food and medicines, water for households. And then we pull the data from the Denver open data sources to get the location of the households and the corresponding what we think is the distribution center location or potential distribution center locations. And so that's how we got the data. And with of course the assumption, because we do have the age distribution, we don't really have the house condition distribution. But we do have the age distribution, so we kind of have made a informed guess about the percentage of households that might be vulnerable during the pandemic that need food deliveries. And probably for them, it's very hard to go to the grocery and sit in line and then take the risk of getting contracted. So that's kind of generally the data sources.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think right now it's just we just keep exploring the SAEVs or SAVs or other shared mobility services and what we can do with it. That's really great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I have another kind of some questions for the second presentation. For this, the trust between autonomous vehicle and also VRUs. Yujie, are you still here?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So they have you? I mean, I don't remember exactly, but have you thought about the way we can improve the trust between or improve the communications between the VRUs and the autonomous vehicles?
Yeah. So in our experiment design, we have we tested several settings. For instance, we would like to change the external appearance of the autonomous cars. For instance, we may demonstrate the vehicle's intention to yield on the windshield of the autonomous cars. Like we will demonstrate a green moving, some animations to let the pedestrian know, yes, I would like to yield. And then in that case, the pedestrian can know the intention for the vehicles more directly. So this is one of the design. And we also think about like to let the vehicles make some like audio cues. Like, yeah, I would like to yield and it's safe to cross. So we tested different cues. One is the the audio cues, and we also test the visual cues.
Okay. Yeah. All right. That's really nice. So the experiment is ongoing.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm just looking forward to some kind of results, maybe in the TRB.
Yes, I hope so. Because like, it's during summertime, and we have some difficulties in recruiting the participants. So we hope, like in the fall semester, when the students come back, we can have more participants, and then we can share the results soon.
Yeah, that's great. And actually here I'm in University of Alabama, and we are also doing something similar. But we are not doing in the lab. We are doing outside on the road.
Wow. Okay.
We mean to we would collect like what you have eye tracking. Also, we are going to collect some neuropsychological data using some brain detectors or something like that. But anyway, it's I mean, it's really hot in the summer, and we did an experiment this summer. It's outside. I mean, this is south. So
yeah. That I can imagine that.
yeah. Okay. Anyway, all right. Thank you, Yujie. And I mean, that's my question for your presentation. Anybody else have some questions you may jump in to ask? All right. I have last question for the fourth presentation by Ruixuan Zhang. Are you still here?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, first of all, I didn't fully understand what you presented. That's just too many questions to me. But I just wonder, do you know the reasons or the frequencies of those issues of the happen? When there's I'm saying what's that? Because if my understanding is correct, you were talking about the anomaly detection. So I'm just talking about when the patterns become, I mean, not normal. What's the frequency? What would be the possible reasons?
Oh, you mean if I understand correctly, your question would be the possible types of anomaly, or
Yeah,
types
that's
of
right.
Okay. Yeah. So for the anomaly detection community, there are roughly like 4 or 5 types of commonly seen anomalies. The first of all is the jamming attack, basically like a denial of service, like DOS attack. Or there's some if you remember the Platoon dynamics model, right? The Platoon dynamics model utilize the output will be the acceleration for a specific vehicle, but in order to have that control output, they will use the eco vehicle velocity and their and the velocity and the clearance gap from other vehicles. So the attacks can, if an attack is observed, so the attack can be either say I just inject a false velocity value from the other vehicles, or I can say, okay, now the eco vehicle is not is not what they should be. Like, so these values, they can play around with these values because all the controller seeing is just a bunch of numbers, right? So the numbers, if the attack can actually modify those numbers to feed the falsified input variables, then the eco vehicle will also generate the incorrect acceleration. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, you just introduced the possibility. I mean, cyber attack of anyway issues with those operations of autonomous vehicles. So I just wonder so because like your research is basically to detect it. I'm just thinking about have you looked into some research then trying to prevent it, not detect it, prevent the cyber attack?
Prevent. I think from the computer science community, they did a lot of adversarial research how to prevent the attack happen into their LiDAR readings or camera readings. But from their research, they basically from the software level use some neural networks to identify which like to add another software or block layer to block the potential attacks. And I don't know. I believe there should also be some hardware level protection, but I have no idea of that, and I don't have any knowledge on the hardware side. I think from the software side, there's some development, like you need higher access to send your message. If your authority is not identified in the whitelist, then any information sent by the agent will be automatically denied for the dynamics model.
Yeah, all right. That sounds like another area of research I would not touch. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. And anybody else have questions? I mean, we have 7 minutes. Moving on to the next session. No questions? All right, if we don't have any questions, just feel free to hang in here, waiting for the next session to start. And I just like to close out for this session. And